This is Fox 29 on the air with Mike Brignac.
The discussion over whether or not Lake Charles Boston should be closed is essentially over, but did that issue bring to light an underlying and pervasive problem of racism in the community? My guest today thinks so. He chairs the leadership team for community and race relations for the city of Lake Charles and is pastor of Sacred Heart Church, the Reverend Henry Mancuso. Father Mancuso, thank you for joining me today.
Good to be here today. Thank you very much.
Now, like I told you earlier, that we're not here to debate the whole LCB issue all over again. That's essentially over with the vote back on June 4th. The school board voted to close the school because of poor performance scores. But I do want to go back to a letter to the editor that you wrote back on June 10th in the June 10th American Press, where you said the decision to close the school might be administratively sound and perhaps educationally based, but may also prove to be socially and communally imprudent. Why?
In making a decision to close the school, I think that, as I mentioned, there could be a sound basis for it from an academic standpoint, from an educational standpoint, but to really to realize that there are deeper implications in that decision. No decision is made in life without a ripple effect. And I think that one of the things I've seen is that belief, again, that the system, took away a school, it closed an institution, that we've lost another part of the African American history or heritage in our community. That may not have been the intent, that may not have even been thought of, but that is a part of the reaction. And part of my concern is I hope that 20 years from now or 25 years from now, there's not going to be that same feeling that they did this to us. And part of it certainly comes out of the numerical majority, 4 African American members on the school board, 11 white members of the school board. And so with all of those factors entering in there can be that sense that, again, there are deeper community or deeper sociological issues that may not be reflected upon in that decision.
And before we go any further, I do want to let the viewers know why you're here. You pastor a church that's in North Lake Charles, right along Opelousas Street. You've been with the African American community for 8 years now.
That's right. It's actually along Mill Street.
Mill Street, okay.
Mill Street, and
that's right.
I have been there, I've been there 8 years, and it puts me in a perspective of crossing over from both the white community and the African American community. But the church is, except for about 4 or 5 people, all African American.
Now, the school board, like you even admitted that it could be educationally based, but they couldn't just keep the school open just to keep from upsetting people. I mean, you see they were kind of in a catch-22, had their own problem. If they keep it open, they risk the state or the feds coming in, the state taking over the school. If they closed it, then they have the community that would get upset. They had their own problems there to deal with as well.
At the same time, that the state in the improvement program allows for additional steps to take place that did not take place. Lake Charles Boston had not yet entered into school improvement level 4. And so if the state, if the government, if No Child Left Behind allows these additional steps to take place, why could they not take place? The same result may have happened. It may have happened a year from now. It may have happened 2 years from now. But there are things in the school improvement program that could have been done if the school board would have allowed it. For example, there could have been an entire reconstitution of the school, new administration, new staff. They could have extended to have some Saturday programs. They could have adjusted the schedule to allow longer time periods. This is a part of what the state allows schools that are failing, or schools that are in decline, to do. And so that was my fundamental question. If we allowed this, if the law permits it, why not let it do that? And again, if it would have failed, then everybody would have said we had our real chance. They had many chances before, but the law allows for, the plan allows for additional things that could have been done that were not done.
Do you think, and again, no one from the school board is here today, so we're not here to debate this issue. Right. They can't defend their decision, but would it have been different if this had been in a different part of town?
And again, that's something we certainly wouldn't know. That's a feeling, that certainly comes out of many people in the African American community. Feelings, as we know from human communication, can have no basis. There can be basis for that. But again, that's a part of that perception. because it was in our neighborhood, everything was not exhausted. And whether that's true or not, it's still a perception. It's still a feeling.
Going back to the letter that you wrote to the editor, you pointed out that indicated some subtle racism with the wording, the way some school board member spoke, speaking about your community, talking to the African American community, that in itself is separating it. It's the them and us mentality.
That's right.
But isn't that, I hear leaders of the African American community doing the same thing, a kind of self-segregation. They're talking about us, the black community, we're talking about us and you, the white community. Don't they do the same thing?
Whenever there's a judgment involved in it, then it can be racism. And again, there certainly can be racism or racist feelings from the black community toward a white person or toward a Hispanic person. And so whenever there is that judgment that I have a greater right or my way is the better way, that becomes the difficulty, that becomes the problem. And so the subtle racism could simply be that we who are in the majority, or we who are in the white community in this case, have decided or perceived that this is the best thing for you. That's where the racism comes in. As I mentioned in the letter, that judgment can deal with class, it can deal with religion, it can deal with gender. So that's any form of prejudice, but in this case, because we're talking about race, it would be a subtle form of racism, where if I as a white guy decided what's best for those in the black community simply because I'm white, because I've had more experience, that would be a racist judgment to make.
All right, interesting topic. We're going to have more from Father Henry Mancuso on this topic right after this. Welcome back. My guest today is Father Henry Mancuso, pastor of Sacred Heart Church on Mill Street in Lake Charles. And we're talking about an issue of racism, whether you agree whether there is a problem or not. Father Mancuso thinks there is, and I happen to believe there is. It's pretty obvious that there is racism in the community, and really everywhere you go.
And within every person.
And that's what I want to talk about this next segment, start with, that everybody has some sort of separatist or racist type of mentality. This race is better than that one, this religion's better than the other, this country's better than all the others. We have that. Everybody, I think, has to have a winner or loser, a better or worse inside their mind. But so how do you deal with something that's that kind of mentality, where I'm better than you?
It really is learning a lot about tolerance, basically being able to tolerate things that are different, and to be able to say that these are opinions that are different than mine, and I'm willing to respect that even though I don't believe that. For example, I spend time with the imam from the Muslim mosque here in town. My religious beliefs are very different than his. My understanding of faith is much different than his. And yet he is a man of God, and he's got a sizable community here.
Right.
And so it's learning that sense of tolerance. And again, it's going to have to come beginning in our homes, where the brothers or sisters tolerate each other, that it doesn't reach the point of my way is the right way, it's only a different way.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned a different religion other than Catholicism, because I know plenty of other religions, and even some in the Catholic faith, that think that it's my way or no way at all, and to be honest, everybody else is going to hell unless they believe my way. So I'm surprised
and even with the church, there are those who are very traditional in their beliefs, there are those that might be very charismatic in their belief, or to get the gospel choir to say that our music is different than those that are more traditional. But to be able to tolerate and respect things as different without using that word, it's the right way or the better way.
Isn't that's just, it boils down to judgment. It's in one way or another, you're judging another person or another class of people.
Right. And again, you can see it in your life with your wife and family that this is my way, this is what I think should be done.
Yeah, and they listen.
But there is another way to do it. But it comes back particularly when there's this group intolerance, or again, an individual decides that he's got the revealed truth or she has the revealed truth, and is going to lead a group in a different way. Right after the hurricane, we didn't worry about the volunteers that were coming in, whether they were black or white, Catholic or Protestant or Jewish. We needed help, and anybody who would come in to help us, we welcomed to them, as brothers and sisters. Well, we need to have that approach and that attitude all the time.
That's right. It's so true. But we just don't get it. Even I try to teach my children that. You know, we don't judge based on anything. You know, everybody's the same in our eyes. We try to teach them that. And then I turn around and judge, you know, they catch me being judgmental or treating somebody differently because they look different, smell different, they go to a different church, that kind of thing. It's so pervasive, and we even, I think it just, the way we live our lives, we live it by example. Even if we think we're not racist or prejudiced against a particular group, just our reactions. Our children see, whether we're a teacher, the students see our reactions to different people. We do it automatically, and unknowingly we influence the next generation. Don't you think? This has to start in the home.
We have a growing Hispanic community in Lake Charles right now. You know, the perception could be, I wonder if they're legal or they're illegal.
I've thought that.
You go into the grocery stores and you see them buying foods that are different than perhaps we've been used to purchasing in stores or supplying them. And so people can quickly make a reaction that we're adapting, you know, to them and to serve them. Or again, they're here just to take our money and then they're going to go back to Texas or to Mexico. And so that is. And unless people do quickly in their homes recognize their own judgments, then as you said with your children, you know, that's not right, that's not appropriate, that's not nice. You know, we wouldn't want somebody to do that to us. And I've said in my own congregation at times, if we were in Northern Ireland, the conflicts that would exist between Catholics and Protestants, where the Catholics are the minorities. And so there must be within us some drive, you know, to dominate another or to dominate another group. And we believe that with God's grace and God's help and with our own learning and adaptation, we can control that.
How do you do it for those that, I mean, it seems like an easy thing, but that's so tough to do. I mean, it takes time to get to this point to where you don't look at color or you don't look at religion.
That's right. And it's a constant reminder. You know, I think that whether it's through preaching, whether it's through segments like this, through public service announcements, there have been so many of those that have been on television reminding people how prejudice can come about.
All right, more with Father Henry Mancuso right after this. Welcome back. My guest today is Father Henry Mancuso. We're talking about racism in Lake Charles. Father Henry, I'm going back to that letter to the editor of June 10th, and let me find that particular, you know, I got to talking with you. Let me go. Here we go. You said in the letter that the yes vote on May 5th, and that's the downtown development vote, might have been undone by the no vote on June 5th. You go on to say that I'm not convinced that Superintendent Wayne Savoy and the 9 dissenting members of the school board understand the deep impact that their decision has on the future development of our community as a united people. How does this decision, the parish, the school board vote on a school, how does that affect the community as a whole?
On May the 5th, there was such a high and there was an enthusiasm that the voters so strongly and overwhelmingly endorsed the city's plan for downtown development. And it was a vote that carried strongly throughout the community, the entire community. 1 month later, exactly 1 month later, there was a significant portion of the community, the African American community, who feel in the sense that they were put back by the no vote. And so I've actually even heard someone say, you know, that they better not ask us for new taxes anytime soon, with that feeling, you know, that something's been taken away from us, and then they are going to want us to work together with them. That it's okay to talk about being a community, working together when it's for the majority. Well, what about when the minority is hoping for something or looking for something? Then it's not us, you know, it's them and it's us. It's, you know, and so that was the issue that I raised. And I know when I sat in the auditorium at LaGrange High School that night, and I heard, you know, a school board member continually say, your community needs to do this, or when your community does this, and then. And it may not have even been intended, you know, but, you know, when those words come out, they're heard, particularly in a community. You know, just as if somebody were talking about you Catholics, you know, you priests, you know, and lumping people together. Well, I'm going to get defensive, you know, with regards to that. And there has to be a way to both implicate and challenge a community, but to recognize that what happens to one part or affects one part affects the whole. You know.
I think that's one of the things that really struck me in that letter when you said that and a lot of us don't get that. We're all little islands, you know. There's us, there's our family, there's our job, and then we go a little farther out. If we attend a church, there's our church, and that's about it, and our group of friends. And there is this us and them mentality everywhere we go. There's this neighborhood over that neighborhood. How do you heal that? How do you get it to this point to where everybody, or a majority of people, realize that we are all in essentially one community? What affects me affects you, affects North Lake Charles, South Lake Charles.
I grew up here in Lake Charles, and much of my life was out in the Oak Park area. And then I pastored St. Margaret for 12 and a half years. My knowledge of what happened north of Broad Street was minimal. Certainly I had some knowledge of it because of the church work, but really the intricacies of life in North Lake Charles I did not know. In St. Margaret and Sacred Heart are 1.7 miles apart. Even when I moved to Sacred Heart, so many people would have to call and say, Father, we want to come and visit you. Now, how do you get to Sacred Heart? It's very easy for us to become very parochial or localized, our church, our community, our social club, without realizing that there is, that larger community. How do we bridge it? I think that certainly when there are interactions between young people, when student councils from one school visit with, interact with, plan joint ventures with student councils from other schools. I think when pastors from different churches and different denominations, work together in ecumenical efforts, that's another way to bridge the gap. One of the things that we're doing in the Lake Area Ministers Group right now is that when we have our monthly meetings, we rotate, from church to church in different parts of the community. And a numbers of pastors have said, I've never been inside this church. I've never been to this church. And so that lack of knowledge or the lack of experience, makes it difficult for people to really be able to understand people as people. And so there have to be forums, there have to be ways where people from different groups are brought together. One of the things that we're going to do on the leadership team for community and race relations in the area of this mingling and bringing people together are to have some dinners where we'll have 8 people from different churches come together for a simple meal in a home. We'll have a stack of questions. People will answer those questions. What does my church believe about baptism? What does my church believe about heaven or hell? Just so that people can be together. If we're not together, we'll never be able to break down some of those barriers.
Wow, well put. And I guess the key is to be able to understand that you can be together and not necessarily agree on everything.
Exactly.
But that's okay.
And we're going to agree to disagree.
All right, we're going to have more with Father Henry Mancuso coming back. Our guest today is Father Henry Mancuso, pastor of Sacred Heart Church, and we're talking about racism. And you pointed out something during the break. This is not, we're not to the boiling point yet, but it is an issue that's got to be dealt with. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. If we don't pay attention or become more aware of it, an issue could become a major issue. It could become that point that brings the pot to a boil. And so we're not, thankfully, at that point. But to pretend that there's no racism or there are no racial tensions would be inaccurate also. You,
like we said earlier, you've been at Sacred Heart for 8 years now. A white man in an African-American community. What have you learned? Well, first let's go back to that initial experience. How was it different than St. Margaret's?
There are many similarities, and probably there are more similarities than there are differences, and I think that people are people, and there is a truth to that, and I don't think we need to say that it's all different. But then the differences will come out of our own cultural upbringing. You figure that, again, many of the people who are at Sacred Heart were raised in a very different time, in a very different world, where there still was a lot of segregation. Many of the people who are there have lived there their entire lives, and it is an area that's economically distressed. I'm not going to say depressed, but distressed. 62% of the people in my neighborhood are renters, and someone else owns the homes. Whereas at St. Margaret, the vast majority of the people would have been homeowners, people who had a real stake in that neighborhood, in that community. So there is a difference. I think, again, many of the people have never had a position of real leadership in the community or even leadership within the church, whereas many people at St. Margaret would have had those opportunities in business and other places, not just to be people at work, but to be in positions of leadership. When I bring children together, I think children are children. Kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grade, you see the innocence of all children and a real common base that is there. But then as people get older, they begin to have some differences that can distinguish them. Certainly, again, you can look at some things. There's going to be musical differences. There are going to be ways in which people enjoy socializing that could be different. Again, not one is not better than the other. It's simply different. One of the things that I've actually enjoyed is that people intend in the African American community, they like preaching to be a little bit longer than the folks in the white community who are looking at their watch to make sure Mass is an hour or a little bit less. If I go over an hour, so it's not a huge issue in the African American community. People are coming, for some preaching and for a lot of music. And so that's the lack of time consciousness would probably be, another difference that is there.
And you mentioned culture, and I want to touch on that too. That this unity you've talked about is not a washing away, a washing out of all cultural differences. It's really keeping your cultural differences and celebrating those, but enjoying the union with everybody else.
We may have made a mistake in our becoming a melting pot, where everybody would melt and blend together to become one. People talk about using more the image of the stew, or like we would say in our area, gumbo, where there are many different ingredients that are there, all have their input into the taste, into the flavor, but they're uniquely distinct too, whether it's chicken and sausage or okra, crab or oysters, they're not all blending to become this big, melting pot. And so we've got to be able to build a community where men and women, black, white, Catholic, Protestant, Hispanic, Muslims are all valued people, respected for who they are. If I, again, go back to what we say, if we start building walls or gated communities, eventually we're going to go so far south that we're going to run into the Gulf of Mexico. Right. So we've got to learn to be together. And it's not easy. Sometimes it's very frustrating for me. And sometimes it can be very difficult, perhaps even for people to work with me, because my ideas could conflict with theirs. The same thing on this whole school board issue. If we had a serious disagreement, hopefully we've been able to express the disagreement, respect one another, and then literally move on. But what I've tried to say is not just an automatic, turning of the page. I've worked with some of the kids, the students from Lake Charles, Boston. Express your feelings, talk about your anger, your disappointment, and then perhaps you can move on. But it's not just a flip of a switch, because these are deep issues. You close somebody's school, you close somebody's church. Those are tough issues for people to deal with.
We're almost out of time, but one last message you'd like to, if we could change something in the next few years here in this community, what would you like to see happen?
If everybody really could listen to the way we speak, if I become more able to hear what I've said and to say, what might the other person hear? It may not have been my intent to say this, but what did I just say? If it could be interpreted in a harmful way, let me do better next time.
Father Henry, I call you Father Henry. That's what I've always called you. It's been great to have you back. I haven't really spoken with you since you married Kim and me back 11 years ago. But thank you. It's a great time with you and a very important topic, I believe. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Enjoyed the opportunity.
Okay, next week, from this very deep issue to a little lighthearted affair, Coca-Cola celebrating their 100th anniversary. So I invite you to come back and have a Coke and a smile with me. Have a great week.